This is the lecture for Miri Albahari's Against No Atman theories of anatta, and the bulk of the lecture is going to be on the first topic, which is Buddhist theories of the self and the Buddhist approach to anatta. And this is because this article, I mean, well, no, this unit is Buddhism and Buddhist views of personal identity. And then this article is sort of going against the typical views, or trying to sort of present a different understanding to the typical views. And then the article on Wednesday is about sort of ethical implications of the views, or how to understand the views. And so neither article spends a lot of time on the sort of traditional understanding of the Buddhist views of the self. And, probably we should get that if we're going to study Buddhist views of the self. So this lecture is going to go into more background on that, and then a couple other things. So first, starting with the Buddhist understanding of the self and the thesis of anatta. And so we're going to start with the five khandhas or skandhas, or it's often translated as aggregates. So the first word is the Pali word. The second word is the Sanskrit word. You maybe see the Sanskrit word more often in India because we're in India, but she uses khandhas because the Pali is more relevant for Buddhism. And so these are involved in what the self is. And so there's five of them. And so just briefly, what are they? So rupa, which is material form, body. This is like physical stuff. Vedana, which is sensation or feeling. So those are pretty straightforward. So sensations, feelings. Samjanya, which is perception, or the capacity to perceive, or like discernment. So the ability to sort of like understand objects as objects, or to label objects as objects, to understand things as certain things. So it's like that kind of uh, ability. Um, Samskara, which is I don't know, mental dispositions, volitional formations, conditioned phenomena. So like um, mental, you can like concepts or something like this. So mental things that are caused by, or a result of, or dispositions that cause us to, or make us disposed to, think about or think in certain ways, or believe in certain ways, or things like this. And finally, vijnana, consciousness or bare apprehension. So just consciousness. So these five things together are sort of mainly what make up the self for Buddhists. And the thing to keep in mind about all of these, well, a few things to keep in mind. So first, notice the first one is material, and the other four are sort of, at least not obviously, material. And so, the self is sort of a combination of material and non-material factors. Second, uh, all of these are subject to change. So like the material form body, that's not staying the same every day. My hair is growing, and sometimes I cut off my hair, my skin is changing, my body is getting larger, smaller, stuff like that. Sensations, feelings, these are constantly changing. Perceptions, discernment, like this is changing all the time. Volitional formations, mental dispositions, condition, these are changing all the time. Consciousness, this is changing all the time. So like none of these are static sorts of things. These are all of these are like groups of things, like aggregates, like things coming together. So like they're like sensation or feeling. It's not like you just have one sensation or one feeling. There's a bunch of sensations or feelings. Material form body. It's not like there's just one body. Your body has lots of different parts and stuff like that. Um, so these are like groups of things, bundles of things, and you smush them all together, and basically you have the self. There's a bit more, but like that's like the main uh, thing that makes up the self. And so what do we sort of conclude from this? So a few sorts of things. So one, the Buddhists make a big deal about this thesis known as dependent arising or dependent origination, which is, how is the self related to the world? It sort of like, it depends upon the world, it comes from the world. It's sort of a result of cause and effect, and it plays a role in cause and effect. So it's not sort of merely a result of the world, but also it affects the world. Everything's sort of like interdependent, like all of these things, the five khandhas that make up the self, they're all like tied up in the causal, um, I don't know, causal flow of the world, the causal structure of the world. Like all of these things are coming from stuff outside of us. All of these things are contributing to things outside of us. So we have a sort of dependency on the everything else outside of us. Um, they think that there's in virtue of the way that we exist, it's a feature of life that it involves suffering, or maybe better translated as unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, which is like that's sort of mostly coming from impermanence. I don't know. Yeah, it's mostly coming from impermanence, and the fact that based on dependent origination and based on what these five khandhas are, nothing is staying the way that it is. Like everything is changing. Nothing lasts forever. Everything goes away eventually, and the the various features of the khandhas make us suffer in certain ways because like we want things to be ways that they are not, or we expect things to be ways that they are not. And so uh, all of these things together broadly combine to suggest that what we ought to be doing is aiming for nirvana, which is sort of the cessation of all of this stuff, the cessation of the five khandhas. And the Buddhists propose a way to achieve nirvana. And so that's sort of like the goal in life, the cessation of these sorts of things. And what they want to say about this whole business, about what is going on with us and the extent to which we exist, their sort of thesis for this is they say there is no self. There is, or this is anatman or anatta, depending on Sanskrit or Pali. And what does it mean to say there is no self? It's that there's, I mean, this will get clearer when we get to the next point about the contrast with Hinduism. But basically, the thought is that you are nothing except like just a combination of a bunch of this stuff rattling around. You're basically like a label we give to these five khandhas. And so there's nothing over and above these things which we can call you. None of these things are especially you. Like it's not like you're especially your consciousness or especially your body. You don't exist before these things, or I mean, to the extent you exist before, like, well, yeah, you certainly don't exist before these things because you're nothing except these things coming together. These things coming together, we give a label to them, but this is a way of understanding them, maybe nothing more. Certainly, there's nothing that is, yeah, there's nothing over and above. So what would be something over and above? If, I don't know, like this is one of the Buddhist arguments for the no self, but like the basic thought is that you aren't anything more impressive, more important, more permanent than any of this sort of thing. This sort of thing is not permanent. This sort of thing, the goal is to end it. You want to cease all of these. You want to sort of these sorts of things not to continue. And so I don't know. There's like the sense in which there's no self is that there's nothing above any of these, and none of these sort of especially deserve the label of self in any sort of like important way or metaphysically interesting way. And if this sounds like Parfit to a certain extent, then yeah, like Parfit thinks that Buddhism and he have like a lot in common. If it sounds like conventionalism, then yeah, like the Buddhist view is kind of a conventionalist sort of view, which is we get this especially if you read the the Questions of King Melinda, which is one of the optional readings way back from the beginning of class. They sort of they use a chariot analogy, which is to say, you know, the chariot is not the wheels, the chariot is not the reins, the chariot is not whatever other parts of the chariot there are. So what is the chariot? Well, chariot is just the label that we give to this combination of things. And similarly for people, we are not Rupa, Vedana, or Samsanya, or whatever. Like we're just like you are just the label that we give to the five khandhas. And so that's no self for the Buddhists, or at least that's the traditional view of no self. And we'll see more about it in these two articles. One thing you'll notice, moving on to the next topic, in this article, I mean, you can even tell from the title, Against No Atman Theories of Anatta. So Atman is the self. Or yeah, I mean, Atman is the self, or at least Atman is the self in the Hindu conception of the self, or even broader, like the Indian conception of the self. Atman is, yeah, let's just, Atman is the self. And so the Buddhists are definitely denying that, or at least as many people read them, they are denying that. So when, like, you can even see, like, the name for no self is Anatman, and so that's like no Atman. And so that's how the Buddhist theory of no self is traditionally understood. And from the title of this article, she's saying, no, we should understand the Buddhist understanding of anatta in a different way, such that they are not necessarily denying Atman. And so one of the reasons she's doing this is because traditionally, as she'll point out in the article, we kind of oppose Buddhism against the sort of orthodox schools of Hindu philosophy. And one of the main oppositions is about the existence of Atman. And so you have the orthodox Hindu schools endorsing Atman, and the Buddhists, among others, denying Atman. And so self or no self, like this is a big fight. And what she wants to say is this is a mistaken way of viewing it. Actually, Buddhism can be compatible, not can be, is compatible with Hinduism. But I don't know, like the her strategy for showing this is to show that Buddhism is compatible with Advaita Vedanta, and specifically Shankara's presentation of Advaita Vedanta. And so this is just to keep in mind that there are like lots of schools of Hindu philosophy. Advaita Vedanta is one sort of school. Advaita there is sort of like denying dualism. And the dualism in this case is the separation of Atman and Brahman. So the Advaita Vedanta school denies that there is any such separation. What exactly does this separation amount to? You don't really need to know what is Atman, what is Brahman. You don't really need to know, except just to point out that, like, for instance, the Dvaita school of Hindu philosophy thinks Atman and Brahman are sort of maybe separate is too strong. I don't know. Separate's fine. Thinks they're separate, and so this is just to keep in mind when you see her presentation of, oh, Buddhism can go along with Hinduism. I think it's good to keep in the back of your mind she has a very specific kind of Hindu philosophy in mind, and not all Hindu philosophies are sort of on board with the theories that she's talking about here. So that's just to make sure you don't end up with a skewed view of Hindu philosophy, since we're reading zero of it. And then finally, she ends up talking about on page 7, which you can't see because it's like covered up, but well, it doesn't matter. But like somewhere, maybe on page 7, or maybe starting on page 7 and later on, we get, in a way, a picture of the debate between Hinduism and Buddhism, which is similar to the picture of the debate, similar to the debate we saw between Wolf and Parfit about sort of truth versus what's good for us. If you recall, Wolf suggested that Parfit's view about persons we should reject because, like, metaphysically, it kind of doesn't matter what's going on. Our decisions on this topic should be driven by sort of practical concerns, like what would be good for us, or like what is the right way to live our lives. And the right way to live our lives is by thinking of ourselves as persons, rather than thinking of ourselves as Parfit wants us to think. And you'll remember perhaps in Parfit's reply to Wolf, in like the comments article, he replied to her that what makes our lives go better or worse is irrelevant to the truth of metaphysics. The truth of metaphysics is independent from practical concerns. And I think we see something like this debate reiterated in a debate that we see in this article between the Hindu and Buddhist philosophies. So keep your eyes open for that if you want to.